Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from Rouse IAS.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC examination. We are going to take up daily edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 4th of January 2020. The articles which we are going to cover today are displayed on the screen. Let us now begin the discussion.
Dear students, Rouse IAS Prelims Test Series 2021 is a complete testing and revision course for the upcoming prelims examination. The program will help you prepare for UPSC prelims through a step-up approach. It is a meticulously designed study plan to organize your preparation and keep you on track towards covering the prelims GS and CSAT syllabus extensively from NCERT to the advanced level. The goal of our Prelims Test Series 2021 program is to exhaustively cover all standard sources of study material, including NCERT, with a study plan to test you at par with UPSC level of questions, thereby improving your chances of clearing the prelims examination. To give multiple revision of the entire syllabus from the perspective of civil service prelims pattern. The test series program will also give you the final revision of all topics and themes before the examination through QIP videos and prelims compass notes. The QIP videos or quality improvement program videos are for speedy revision of all important topics for the upcoming prelims examination. QIP videos are kind of crash course for the prelims examination. And prelims compass are 8 subject-wise prelims compilation of all static and current affair topics important for the upcoming prelims. Rouse IAS Prelims Test Series 2021 will include topics test, testing the concept of candidate. It will include thematic test on both the concept and the current affair of that particular theme. It will also include current affair tests covering the monthly current affairs. And there will be full-length test before the final exam to simulate you for the D-Day. There is a link in the description of this video. You can click on the link for registration and to also check out the demo Q.
Before we begin the discussion, let us go through some of the statements which you have to find out through this discussion whether they are true or false. A double-blinded test is one where some volunteers get the vaccine and some do not. Trans fats pose a higher risk of heart disease than saturated fats. CDSCO comes under Directorate General of Health Services, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. The patents have been given protection under WTO's TRIPS regime or trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. Section 3D of Patents Act 1970 enables compulsory licensing. The trademarks have not been given statutory protection in India. Covishield is an inactivated vaccine. Section 301 of US Trade Act 1974 provides for identification of those countries whose policies result in the denial of adequate and effective intellectual property rights protection to US-based companies. The Patent Cooperation Treaty is an international treaty with more than 150. An anti-disclosure amendment that hits public health appears on page number 6. So the central government has recently published Patent Amendment Rules 2020. We know that acts are made by Parliament, but the rules and regulations as to how that particular act of the Parliament shall be actually implemented is delegated to the respective ministries and departments. And then later on, they are tabled on the floor of the houses to be checked by the member of Parliament whether they align themselves to the act or not. And so the central government has amended the patent rules. And one of the most important amendments which the central government has brought is amending the format of a statement that patentees and licensees are required to annually submit to the patent office, disclosing the extent to which they have commercially worked or made the patented inventions available to the public in the country. Now, according to the author, this particular amendment has significantly watered down the disclosure format, and this could hamper the effectiveness of India's compulsory licensing regime, which depends on full disclosure of patent working information. Now, if you look at the UPSC syllabus, it clearly says issues relating to intellectual property rights. And so in this regard, we are going to first understand the general features of patents. What are the two kinds of patents? Patent system in India, and then finally we will look into concerns or issues with intellectual property rights system in India and the enforcement issues related to IPR. So starting with addressing the basics about patents, the very basics. What actually are patents? So whenever a person carries out an invention or discovers something, they want to be recognized for it, and apart from recognition, they also want some money for it, because more often than not, especially the big companies invest a lot of money while inventing a new product, and so they would want their right to make that particular product, use that product, and finally sell that product exclusively for themselves. And that is where the patents come into play. So a patent is a statutory right for an invention granted for a limited period of time. If you look across the world, most countries give patent to a particular person or a company for 20 years, 30 years, or maybe 50 years. That varies from one territory to another. And so upon being granted the patent holder enjoys exclusive monopoly with respect to, as we have discussed, making, using, or selling the patented product or the process for a certain period of time. Let's take an example. Let's take the example of the world's most used search engine, which is Google. And so, when the Larry Page invented the algorithm for the search which is utilized by the Google, which is known as PageRank, in 1998, it was patented by him, and none of the other search engines can utilize this particular algorithm to make their own search engine. And since this method of searching the web was so unique but also patented by the Google, which has helped Google in maintaining its monopoly in the search arena. Now, if we talk about the global recognition of patents, they are protected under WTO TRIPS, or trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. Under this agreement, member countries must provide protection to patents for a minimum of 20 years. So if you agree to sign TRIPS, you must amend your internal or domestic laws so as to enable the minimum patent protection of 20 years. And there are other conditions as well. And so, once a patent expires, the innovation enters the public domain, which means anyone can commercially exploit the invention without infringing the patent. And so if a product was invented in 2000, and if the protection for patent is for 20 years, then 2020 is that year in which that particular product and its formula will become available for the public to be exploited commercially, and the inventor will no longer have a monopoly. Now the question arises that if I get my idea or my product patented in India, will that particular product have protection in other jurisdictions, for example in Canada, US, or in Germany? And so the clear answer is no. Patent protection is territorial right, and therefore it is effective only within the territory of India or wherever it is recognized. There is no concept of global patent. There is no entity where you can get your idea or product patented and you will get the universal protection. There is a need to apply for patents separately in other countries. However, a single international patent application can be filed in India under the Patent Cooperation Treaty. In that case, patent would be protected in all the countries which are members of this particular treaty. Now, this Patent Cooperation Treaty is an international treaty with more than 150 contracting states. And also it is administered by the World Intellectual Property Organization, or acronymed as WIPO. And so the PCT makes it possible to seek patent protection for an invention simultaneously in a large number of countries by filing a single international patent application instead of filing several separate national or regional patent applications. So far we have learned basics about patent, that they are statutory rights for an invention granted for a limited period of time, which enables patent holder to exercise exclusive monopoly, which means no one else can make, use, or sell that product without their permission. It is protected under TRIPS of WTO, which mandates at least 20 years of protection, and then there is no concept of global patents. However, there is a Patent Cooperation Treaty, or PCT, which is administered by World Intellectual Property Organization, or WIPO, which has 150 members, and it makes it possible to seek patent protection simultaneously in large number of countries. And let us now move on and understand what are the two kinds of patents, mainly product patent and process patent. So as you can clearly see, patents can be for the final product or for the process which was followed for making that product. So for example, if a product A is being manufactured, but before that there is a process which is followed where it starts from stage 1, goes into stage 2, and then finally A is manufactured. And so when this process is patented, the patent is granted for a particular manufacturing process and not for the product A itself. So any other person can produce the same product through some other process. So for example, they can start from 3, go to 4, and then finally end up at A. And so it is not the same as this one. And so the implication is that there will be more than one producer for the same product because of the possibility of different process for the manufacturing of the same product, in this case A, which is a process patent, which is a patent which is issued for a particular process, such as say process used for manufacturing a specific chemical compound. And in this case, the patent holder enjoys the exclusive monopoly over the process used for manufacturing the product. And as we have discussed, other manufacturers can manufacture the same product by using a different process. Whereas if we talk about the product patent, this patent is issued for a particular product, such as say a pharmaceutical drug or a vaccine in current context. In that case, the patent holder enjoys the exclusive monopoly for manufacture of this patent product. And so, if a country grants product patent, then it becomes difficult to counter the monopoly of that company because it is not legal to produce the same drug. Whereas, if a country grants process patent, then the same product can be manufactured by a lot of producers, just the process has to be different. And this particular strict divergence between product and process patent is manifested across the world. The developed countries follow product patent system. On the other hand, process patent system is preferred by developing countries. And this is one of the problems which the developed countries complain against developing countries, because one of the weaknesses of the process patent regime is that it gives less protection for the inventor. There is a high tendency for the competitors to re-engineer the original invention by discovering a new process with less strain and investment. But on the contrary, the benefit of the process patent is that ultimately the consumer is the one who benefits because of the competition. Similarly, on the contrary, product patent system gives higher level of protection to the inventor as there will not be any other patent holder. To give you an insight, TRIPS follow the product patent regime, and this is also one of the criticisms of TRIPS and WTO in general, which demonstrates the hegemony of the developed countries in the overall trading rules and their decisions. And this also got reflected in India's patent regime. India's 1970 patent law originally allowed only process patents before it was amended in 2005 to comply with TRIPS, under which there is only product patent which is allowed. Let us now discuss the patent system in India, which is governed by Patents Act 1970, which was later on amended in 2005 to comply with the TRIPS obligations. And there are three criteria for issuing patents in our country. The first is the novelty factor. Its newness. You have to demonstrate that it is actually a new product. That is, it has not been published in India or elsewhere across the world, and there is no prior or public information of its usage in the past. So that is one. Then, it must involve an innovative step, which means that it should demonstrate technical advancement in comparison to existing knowledge. It should actually be quite technically advanced as compared to what people are using right now. And then, it should be something which is non-obvious to a person who is skilled in the relevant field of technology. And then finally, it should be something which should be capable of industrial application. This is one of the most important aspects while giving a patent. It should be something which can be industrially produced. And as far as what cannot be patented, there are various items which can never be patented in India. For example, frivolous inventions, inventions that harm public order or morality or health of animals, plants and humans. An important aspect is a method of agriculture or horticulture can never be patented. Traditional knowledge, computer program, inventions related to atomic energy, or a mere discovery of a scientific principle. So these are the items which can never be patented in our country, and they could be put forward in front of you as options in prelims examinations. So keep in mind these things. Now moving on to the issues and concerns which the developed countries often raise with respect to India, and these concerns have been mainly taken from the report by USTR or US Trade Representatives. So we know that Section 301 of US Trade Act 1974 provides for identification of those countries whose policy result in denial of adequate and effective intellectual property rights protection to the US based companies. So basically it mandates the government and the trade representatives to identify those countries where the IPR regime is quite weak. And of course, India appears prominently in these reports. And countries that are identified as falling short with respect to protection, enforcement, and market access for IP intensive industries are listed in something which is known as Special 301 report. And so India has been placed on the priority watch list for its alleged poor enforcement of intellectual property regulations. And let us understand those. Starting with one of the major concerns with the pharmaceutical sector has been Section 3D of the Patents Act and issue of compulsory licensing. Now the Section 3D of Patents Act 1970 does not allow patent to be granted to inventions involving new forms of a known substance unless it differs significantly in properties with regard to efficiency or efficacy. Thus, Indian Patent Act does not allow for evergreening of patents. So what is evergreening? So let's say if a company holds a patent for a drug A for 20 years, which was obtained in 2000 and set to expire in 2020. Now we know that in January 2021, other companies will become eligible to sell this particular product. And of course, the company which originally manufactured A would want to have this patent for more number of years because they want to perpetuate monopoly. And now what they will do, that just before 2020 arrives, they will come up with a new drug, let's say A dash or A prime. They will claim that it is different from A, and so companies make minor changes in their drug formulations which may or may not increase the efficacy of the drug, and then they try to get an extension on their existing patent for further 20 years. And so this particular Section 3D does not allow for such an extension of the patent unless and until you are able to show that A prime is drastically different from A and has particularly enhanced efficacy. Now, the Section 3D was in news a lot 5 to 7 years ago because the constitutional validity of Section 3D of Indian Patent Act was challenged by global MNC Novartis when its application for extending the patent of cancer drug Glyvec was rejected. However, the Madras High Court upheld the constitutional validity of Section 3D and stated that this section was important in order to distinguish between real innovators and trivial modifications or tweaks. But nonetheless, this has continued to be a big issue as far as the concerns of developed countries with India is concerned, because their MNCs would always want evergreening in order to maximize their profit, but India denies them. And the second issue is the matter of compulsory licensing. So what is compulsory licensing? Now, compulsory licensing are authorizations given to a third party by the government to make, use or sell a particular patented product without the need of the permission of the original patent owner. And the interesting fact is that the provisions related to compulsory licensing are also given in or allowed by the TRIPS as well. So they are an exceptions of TRIPS. However, there are certain prerequisite conditions which need to be fulfilled if the government wants to grant a compulsory license. And just like Glyvec Novartis, there is a famous case of 2013 where India exercised the power to give or grant compulsory license, in which the license to manufacture a patent drug Nexavar, which is patented by a company which is known by the name of Bayer, the patent was compulsorily granted to Natco Pharma to manufacture and sell Nexavar in India. Subsequently, the price of Nexavar got reduced to 4% of its original price. And this is the benefit of compulsory license, and also one of the biggest troubles which American and European companies have with India. They complain, or rather fear, that government of India could exercise the power of compulsory license in other expensive drugs as well. USA believes that the compulsory licensing goes against the interest of its pharma companies. And they also fear that following the example of India, other developing countries could also start to follow suit and issue compulsory licenses as it is allowed by the WTO TRIPS as well. So it will not be a violation of WTO regulation. And so this is one of the reasons why India always prominently appears in Special 301 report. Then there are other issues which are quite genuine, because of which developed countries have problems. We know that there is something which is known as trademark, which in layman's language is a symbol or a visual symbol used by a company on its goods and services to distinguish them from other similar goods or services originating from other companies. And this has been given statutory protection under Trademark Act 1999, also under TRIPS agreement. Now the problem is that when the foreign companies come to India, they have to register their trademarks and there are excessive delays over there. And India has a very high level of trademark counterfeiting, against which the authorities in our country do not take proper action. Apart from that, the enforcement of other IPR regulations are quite weak in our country, and that is because of two important reasons. India is a key producer and exporter of counterfeit foodstuff, pharmaceutical, perfume, cosmetic, textiles, footwear, and electronics and electrical equipment. A report has put the figure that around 55% of global seizures of fake pharmaceuticals originated in India, making it by far the largest producer of fake pharmaceuticals. The developed countries have raised concerns with respect to judicial delays in disputes related to IPR infringement. A foreign company comes to India, finds that its trademark, hologram, or any other patent has been violated, they file a case, but it gets 10 to 20 years in order to dispose that case, by which the patent has already expired and the profit which was to be made during this period has already over. And then finally, the report has also highlighted that India maintains extremely high customs duty on products which are IP intensive, such as medical devices, pharmaceuticals, information and communication technology products, solar energy equipment, and capital goods. So from the perspective of prelims as well as mains examination, the concept of IPR is a very important one. Although we were not able to cover all kinds of IPR, but the focus was especially on patents. We discussed the general information regarding patents, the kinds of patents, the patent system in India, and finally the general concerns with respect to IPR system in India. So finally, summarizing the arguments given in the editorial, the new rules have amended the format of a statement that patentees and licensees are required to annually submit to the patent office, disclosing the extent to which they have commercially worked or made the patented inventions available to the public in the country. The amendment has significantly weakened the requirement of submitting such information in the disclosure format. And what this would do is that it could hamper the effectiveness of India's compulsory licensing regime, which depends on full disclosure of patent working information. And hence, this in turn could hinder access to vital inventions, including life-saving medicines, thereby impacting the public health. Let's now move on to the next discussion. India approves 2 COVID-19 vaccines for emergency use appears on page number 1, and rightly so. So the regulator, which is the Central Drug and Standards Committee or CDSCO, on Sunday formally granted or approved the COVID-19 vaccines by Bharat Biotech and the Serum Institute of India. So these are the two vaccines. First is known by the name of Covishield, a vaccine which was developed by Serum Institute, Pune, based on the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine. And the second one is Covaxin, which has been developed by Bharat Biotech in collaboration with ICMR. So what we'll do is that we'll first understand the basics about these two vaccines, mainly AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine and the second one, which is Bharat Biotech ICMR Covaxin. Once we have done that, then we will talk about some basics about Central Drugs and Standards Committee or CDSCO and look into its functions. So in order to be able to understand that what this vaccine does to induce the immune response in the people, and for that obviously we need to understand how virus itself enters the body and replicates. So let us first understand how a virus interacts with
the cells of our body. Now, the first stage obviously is the entrance of a virus into a cell, because unless and until a virus enters a cell, it cannot replicate itself, because virus need the cell's protein making machinery to multiply. So they first need to gain entry into a healthy cell. And as you might know, that coronavirus or COVID-19 have a special set of proteins known as spiky proteins that allow them to bind with the cells. So as you can see in the animation, that the spike protein helps the virus to latch on to human cell. Then after it latches on to the cell, the virus fuses with the cell and once inside releases a strand of RNA. Now RNA or ribonucleic acid is like a blueprint, which is basically a set of genetic code that has instruction to make exact copies of the same virus. So as you can see in the animation, the virus has already released the yellow or orangish color RNA into the cell. Now the reason why the virus has entered into the cell is that it wants to create more of its copies. And in that process, it is helped by ribosomes, which are tiny particles in the host cell, which have this special capability to read genetic material. And as you can see in the animation, as the virus's RNA passes through the ribosome produces exact viral proteins which the virus wants this to produce. Now these production of viral proteins is much needed because they are the essential ingredients of viral RNA as well as other parts of the viruses like the outer spike protein itself, which in the first place helped the virus to enter into the cell. The proteins are also needed to make the outer membrane of the virus as well. So as you can see in the animation, as soon as the viral RNA interact with the ribosome, not only it is producing the RNA copy, but it is also producing the viral proteins. So the component in orange color will form the genetic material of the virus, whereas the component in the red color which is being produced will form the spike protein. And this you can see will lead to the formation or assembly of a new virus inside the host cell. And thousands and millions of more such viruses are produced inside the healthy host cells. When fully assembled, the virus can now exit the cell to seek other healthy cells and start the process again. And this goes on and on unless and until the body develops immunity against the virus.
So with the explanation through animation, it is now clear to us that spike protein plays a very crucial role in the way COVID-19 enters and attaches to the cells of our body, and especially the respiratory system. Because these proteins allow the virus to penetrate into the cells and then multiply there. Viruses cannot replicate or multiply on their own, and hence they need a machinery of a cell, and for that they need to enter it first, where these spike protein play a very crucial role. So various vaccines and drugs are targeting the various steps of this viral entry and replication. AstraZeneca and Oxford vaccine tries to build the immunity in the body against these spike proteins. And let us understand how. So when a person is infected with the COVID-19 virus, that is SARS-CoV-2, the reason it spreads in the body easily is because the spikes on its surface. These spikes, also known as spike protein, allow the virus to penetrate cells and therefore multiply. So the vaccine developed by Oxford and AstraZeneca, which tries to build the body's immunity against this spike protein. Now the idea is to create antibodies to fight this spiked surface so that the virus does not even have the chance to penetrate the cells. So what we intend to do is that there is a person who shall be, so in this case we are trying to build the immunity not against the virus itself but against the spiky proteins. Now let us understand how do we do that. So the vaccine does not uses the coronavirus strain. So you know that in polio vaccine, the virus which is being used is a polio virus. But in this case, the vaccine which has been developed by Oxford University does not uses the SARS-CoV virus. Instead, it uses a strain of adenovirus. So now you might ask that adenovirus can infect humans once injected. So this adenovirus is first weakened so that it does not causes any kind of sickness or illness once injected. So as you can see that it was first red in color, now it has become green. But again, it is tweaked. Now, what is this tweaking? Now, this tweaking is that the genetic material of this particular virus is changed in such a way that it enables the virus to manufacture the spike protein once it enters the human cell. So now you can understand that once this adenovirus will enter the human cell, it is weakened, so it can't harm humans. But at the same time, its genetic material has been tweaked in such a way that it produces the spike proteins. Now, these spike proteins in themselves are not dangerous to humans. They just facilitate the COVID virus to attach to the cell. Once it is inside the cell of a human, the body's immune system is expected to recognize the spike protein as a potentially harmful foreign substance and starts building antibody against this spike protein. And hence, this vaccine builds immunity against the spike protein. Now, once the antibodies against spike have already been manufactured in the human body, if that person is infected with COVID, these antibodies won't allow the attachment of the COVID with the human cell of the respiratory system. So that is how the whole mechanism works. And now moving on to the co-vaccine, which has been developed by a company known by the name of Bharat Biotech in collaboration with ICMR's Institute, National Institute of Virology. So what is the mechanism of this vaccine? So first and foremost, this is an inactivated vaccine, which means that it has been made by using particles of COVID-19 virus that were killed, making them unable to infect or replicate once they are inside the body. And it is believed that injecting particular doses of these particles serves to build immunity by helping the body create antibodies against the dead virus. Let us understand how. So first, a live COVID or coronavirus is taken and then that is killed. We know that once the virus is killed, its structure will be destroyed and it cannot divide or replicate once it is inside the body. But you should know that it maintains some level of integrity, or you can say that even if it is destroyed, the destroyed volume of viruses will still contain the similar proteins and other structures, which can be recognized by the immune system and which can evoke an immune response. And so that is the idea behind inactivated vaccine. But the problem with inactivated vaccines is that they usually don't provide immunity that's as strong as live vaccines. So you may need several doses over time in order to get ongoing immunity against the disease. Let us now talk about this particular organization, which is Central Drug Standard Control Organization, which is the central drug authority for discharging functions assigned to the central government under Drugs and Cosmetics Act. So under the Drug and Cosmetics Act, the regulation of manufacture, sale and distribution, which is manufacture, sale and distribution or MSD of drugs, is primarily the concern of state authorities. While the central authorities are responsible for approval of new drugs or clinical trials in the country or laying down the standards for drugs, control over the quality of imported drugs. So all these things which have been entrusted by the Drugs and Cosmetic Act to the central government is or comes under the functions of CDSCO, which involves approval of new drugs and clinical trials, import of registration and licensing, license approving of blood banks, LVPs, vaccines, RNA and DNA products, and some medical devices, amendments to Drugs and Cosmetics Acts, banning of drugs and cosmetics, grant of test licenses, personal license and NOC for export, testing of new drugs, and overall oversight and market surveillance through Inspectorate of Center over and above state authorities. So this is a very important information, especially pertaining to prelims examination. Let us now move on to the next discussion. Then a column appears on page number 6, a hurried gamble. And so according to the Hindu newspaper, the rolling out these two vaccines are a kind of gamble by the central government. And they have two very good arguments to support their claim. Of course, this discussion is not going to be very important from the perspective of civil services examination, but just that it appears, you should keep in mind two important facts. First deals with the procedure which has been followed while granting the licenses or approval for these two vaccines, and the data which has been submitted by the agencies responsible for their manufacturing and production. And the second deals with an ethical concern. So the first issue is the lack of data being submitted by both the manufacturers, which is Serum Institute and Bharat Biotech. You see that we have already discussed many times in our DNS that there are 3 phases for a vaccine trial: phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3. In phase 1, the vaccine is administered to healthy individuals to test the safety of the vaccine, whether it is toxin or what kind of physiological changes it induces, and that is why healthy individuals are chosen. Then in the second stage, it is tested that whether the vaccine is actually effective or not, whether it is producing the antibodies which are required for defense against the actual virus. And in the third stage, a double-blinded test is conducted, where some volunteers get the vaccine and some do not. So if there are 1,000 participants in a trial, 500 will get the vaccine shot and 500 will just get a placebo. But no one knows who has actually got the vaccine. And that is why it is called blinded. And this test is considered as a foundation of evidence-based medicine. If we talk about the AstraZeneca vaccine, the Indian manufacturer, of course, is Serum Institute, which has furnished the data from phase 3 trial which were conducted in UK and Brazil. But no data has been submitted on how the vaccine has protected the 1600 Indian volunteers on which the trial was conducted. But if you compare other vaccines in other countries, for example Pfizer, Moderna and AstraZeneca, they have made at least partial results public. The case of Bharat Biotech is even poorer, which is conducting a phase 3 trial right now, and it is yet to furnish similar data because it has not been able to finish recruiting the required number of volunteers. And so the overall data submitted by both these vaccines just testifies the safety. So there is no denying the fact that these two vaccines are safe. They are as safe as a clean water. But whether they are effective or more effective than a clean water is something which will be known later on. And that is where the second issue comes into play, which is an ethical issue. So we know that vaccines will soon be available for being injected into people. But at the same time, phase 3 trials will still be conducted. And so it will be unethical to expect a volunteer to participate in a trial where there is only 50% chance of being administered the actual vaccine is the scenario when they can go to the market and get the real dose for 100% certainty. And so that is the ethical dilemma. When a person can actually get injected with an actual vaccine, why would you expect that volunteer to go to such a trial and put his or her life in danger? And so these are the two big concerns which the Hindu newspaper has highlighted. Next news item appears on page number 10. FSSAI slashes limit for trans fat levels in foods. So the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India has capped the amount of trans fatty acids in oils and fats to 3% for 2021 and 2% by 2022 from the current permissible limit of 5% through an amendment to the FSSAI regulations. Now questions like these have two aspects. One is that you know about the trans fatty acids, and the second one is that you know about FSSAI and what it is doing to control the level of trans fatty acids and why it is doing so. Now the basics regarding FSSAI has already been discussed in our DNS, and so this discussion is going to focus on trans fatty acids, what are different types and why they are dangerous for our health. But before that, let us have a look at few of the questions which UPSC has asked in the past. Starting with a question which was asked in 2011. A company marketing food products advertises that its items do not contain trans fats. What does this campaign signify to the customers? And the right answer was the food products are not made out of hydrogenated oils. Yes, the food products are not made out of animal fat oils, and the oils used are not likely to damage the cardiovascular health of consumers, and so the D. Similarly, in 2016, UPSC asked, with reference to pre-packaged items in India, it is mandatory to the manufacturer to put which of the following information on the main label as per FSSAI regulations. This was asked in 2016. Of course, list of ingredients including additives, nutrition information, and whether it is a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian indicated by green or red circle, solid circle. And so the right answer was C. And similarly in 2018 also a question on FSSAI was asked. So you can understand that how important the topics related to food safety and standards are. And this is not the first time. It was in 2011 that India first passed a regulation that set a trans fatty acid limit of 10% in oils and fats, which was further reduced to 5% in 2015. While the present regulation comes into effect immediately, industry players were made to take a pledge back in 2018 that they would comply with the WHO's call for action to reduce TFA by 3% by 2021, allowing them 3 years to comply with the latest norm. Now, the revised regulation applies to edible refined oils, vanaspati, margarine, bakery shortenings, and other mediums of cooking such as vegetable fat spreads and mixed fat spreads. But now it has been suggested that the regulation must not be restricted to oil fats but must apply to all foods. And it is hoped that FSSAI will address this as well before January 22 to eliminate chemical trans fatty acids from the Indian platter. And so the question, what are trans fats? So trans fats or trans fatty acids are a form of unsaturated fat. And they are both naturally occurring as well as artificially made by humans. So naturally occurring trans fats are produced in the gut of some animals, and foods made from these animals, for example milk and meat products, may contain small quantities of these fats. Whereas if we talk about artificial trans fats, which are created in an industrial process that adds hydrogen to liquid vegetable oils to make them more solid. Since they are easy to use, inexpensive to produce, and last for a very long time, and also give foods a desirable taste and texture, they are still widely used despite their harmful effects being well known. So despite being harmful, they are extensively used, or they were extensively used in food industry because first, they are inexpensive to produce. They keep the taste and texture for a very long time, and that is why they are very well suited for food industry. But since there are regulations, they must be very, very harmful. And so let us now discuss the associated risk of trans fatty acids. And first and foremost is that they pose a higher risk of heart disease than saturated fats. We know that any kind of fat raises the total cholesterol level, but TFAs not only raise the total cholesterol levels but also reduce good cholesterol, which protects us against heart disease. And so it increases the chances of developing heart disease and stroke. Then it can lead to compromised fetal development, causing harm to yet to be born baby. Then various studies have indicated the higher TFA levels with the risk of cancer. Since the trans fats are metabolized differently by the liver than other fats, and hence it interferes with the normal liver functions as well. The higher level of TFA consumption has already been linked to type 2 disease. Everyone knows that people who consume higher amount of junk food or fast foods gain weight, and most of the junk food contains high amount of trans fatty acids, so it is directly related to abdominal obesity. Then trans fats have already been linked to greater risk of infertility in women. Also, some psychological studies have suggested that those who eat more trans fats are at higher risk of depression than those who do not eat. And finally, the consumption of trans fats has been linked to behavioral irritability and increased general aggression. So you can understand that not just the metabolism, but it also impacts your behavior. So if you have been eating a lot of trans fats, just quit cold turkey. And then finally, what are the steps which have been taken by FSSAI? First is Heart Attack Rewind, the 30-second public service announcement that will help support FSSAI's target of eliminating trans fat in India by year 2022. Then Eat Right campaign, which was launched in 2018, where the edible oil industries took a pledge to reduce the level of salt, sugar, saturated fat and trans fat content by 2% by 2022. Then Swasth Bharat Yatra, an initiative under the Eat Right campaign, which was a pan-India cyclothon to engage citizens on issues of food safety. And then finally, FSSAI has stated that the food establishments which use trans-free fat oils and do not have industrial trans fat more than 0.2 grams per 100 gram of food can display trans fat free logo on their outlets as well as on their products to encourage such brands and products. So this next article appears on page number 14. China amends defense law to boost war preparedness. So China has amended its national defense law to mobilize military and civilian resources in defense of national interests at home and abroad. And now what it has done is that it has given the Central Military Commission, which is headed by the President, greater power in mobilizing resources to protect a new and broader definition of what constitutes the national interest. Now we'll get to see a lot of analysis in the Hindu newspaper in the coming days, but what is important is that so far this power did not clearly lie with the President. But now the President has been made more powerful. And another term has been added, which is the protection of development interests, which includes protection of China's economic activities and assets overseas, such as those under BRI initiative. When we know that the initiatives under BRI are scattered across the continents. And so this amendment has enabled the President to authorize an attack in case any of its port or any such other assets are threatened. Amendment also clearly says that China will participate in global security governance, join multilateral security talks, and push for and set up a set of international rules that is widely accepted, fair and reasonable. So what are the goals or aims of China with this amendment? So first, it aims at increasing the control exercised by CMC and transferring some decision-making power which was previously exercised by State Council or the Cabinet, which runs the government. And now the power has been given to the President. And all has been done because the broader goal is to speed up the modernization plans for People's Liberation Army. And the change comes amid a push for closer civil-military fusion with a target to make People's Liberation Army a world-class military or on par with USA Army by 2049, that is in next 28 years. Then finally, two news articles appear respectively on page number 3 and 4. IOC launches initiative, Bilara villagers mobilized to tackle menace of addiction. Now, whenever we write answers in mains examination, it is often suggested to us that we substantiate our answers with proper examples or case studies. And these case studies should be ideally taken or fetched from newspaper, and especially the events which were in news recently. And so these two news articles will help you in that regard. First is that Indian Oil Corporation launched a new initiative, Prayas, to address the needs of the local communities near its fuel stations. So we know that Indian Oil Corporation or IOC has a lot of fuel stations. And so this initiative of Prayas will try to identify the local problems near to their petrol stations or gas stations and will try to solve those issues. So what they have done in Delhi is that they have identified the night shelters near to their gas stations, went there and distributed blankets. And so this can be cited as one of the examples of CSR initiatives being taken by IOC. Similarly, this next interesting article appears on page number 4, which can go a long way in demonstrating the impact of joint action or social action by a community. So this particular village was reeling under drug menace for several years. And finally, the people of this village, which belongs to Jodhpur district, have come together to tackle addiction among youth. So what they have done, they have imposed very stringent surveillance, and you can say that a kind of community policing. And not just that, apart from this, they have imposed massive penalties ranging up to 11,000 rupees on anyone who was caught having a drug. And all this will be done by the village community with no involvement of law enforcement agencies. So this is a social action against a menace, which is addiction. So these two can be cited in different papers. For example, this one in GS 2 and 3 and this one in GS 1 and 4.